almost over. It's almost over.
Well, hello everyone. Here we are at the end of 2024. It's been an interesting year. Now, I cannot do what I did last year where I ranked every movie I saw because I counted them up this year and I've seen 52 movies in the theaters and that's just way too much. So what I've decided to do this year is do my bottom 10, the 10 worst movies I've seen, and my top 10, the 10 best movies I've seen. This week, we're going to start with the bottom 10. These are the 10 worst movies that I paid my good, hard-earned money to see in the theaters. Without further ado, let's begin, shall we?
Begin countdown.
Number 10, In a Violent Nature. Now, this one was interesting because there are a lot of people who really enjoyed this. It had an interesting premise. It's a slasher horror film. Introduced us to Johnny. He's the masked killer in this movie. And it does have one of the greatest kill scenes you'll ever see in a slasher film. If you haven't seen it yet, just check out the yoga scene. However, this movie had so many slow parts, so many weird, drawn-out scenes, and it had an ending that, well, left me really underwhelmed. I mean, literally nothing happens in the last, 7 to 10 minutes of this film, despite the fact that it seems to be building towards something. I would actually like to see a second part of this, see if they can kind of flesh it out more. But unfortunately, this year, it's the 10th worst movie I've seen. At number 9, Gladiator 2. I mean, who asked for this film? Was anybody asking for a sequel to Gladiator? Gladiator's a brilliant film. This is a very, very cheap imitation. Sure, you get some decent performances from Denzel Washington and Paul Mescal, and some decent effects, but it's just dull. It's long. It's not very original. It steals a lot from the first film. Again, who was asking for this movie? I wasn't. I don't think you were either. At number 8, Afraid. Afraid came out at the end of last summer. Really, not a very original story. It's about a family. They're overwhelmed. The father is in this company. They create an AI, artificial intelligence. It's supposed to help the family, but instead, turns evil and does bad things. We've seen this a million times. It should have been a streaming film that barely anybody watched. Instead, it was a theatrical release. John Chow's in it. He's decent. That's about it. There's really not much more I could say about it. If you run across it on Netflix or Prime or whatever, probably best to avoid it. Pretty dull stuff. At number 7, Imaginary. Another horror film. Came out back in March. I thought the trailer looked really good. It's about this girl's imaginary friend coming to life, doing evil deeds. Again, just very dull. Acting is poor, the story's poor, the effects are poor. It's been a poor year for horror films. We've covered that before. This was just another dull, forgettable, boring horror movie. Again, something you probably want to avoid. It really doesn't have anything to recommend it. If you see it, skip it. At number 6, Kraven the Hunter. Yeah, that was my video last week. I talked about Kraven the Hunter. Pretty terrible movie. Superhero fatigue is a real thing. I think people are kind of getting tired of the genre. But it doesn't help that a lot of these superhero movies anymore just suck. There was very little to recommend that film. Outside of a couple decent acting performances by Aaron Taylor Johnson and Russell Crowe, everything else in this movie is pitiful. Acting, effects, story. Might be the worst superhero movie I've ever seen.
Not very good.
At number 5 is the movie Here. I mean, what do you get when you combine Tom Hanks, Robin Wright, and Robert Zemeckis? Well, you would think you would get at least a decent film. But nope. One of the worst one of the dullest movies I've ever seen. I think that Tom Hanks is a great actor, or at least he used to be. He looked like he was so uninterested in this role. It looked like maybe, he just got his paycheck and just gave his lines and just went home. Robin Wright, same with her. I remember walking out of this theater thinking I'd been there for 3 hours. I'd only been there for about an hour and 40 minutes. Terrible, terrible film. Very disappointing. At number 4, ISS. Remember ISS? No? I'm not surprised. It came out way back in January. It's a sci-fi movie. It's, again, an interesting premise. A bunch of astronauts are on the International Space Station. Some Russian, some American. And a war breaks out between the two countries. And it spills over into the space station. I mean, that sounds kind of cool, right? Nope. I had to look up this movie just to remember even the most basic plot points. It's the kind of film where you see it and you walk out, and 5 minutes later, you'd have trouble saying what the movie was about. It was just dull. Acting was terrible. Effects are okay. It's only an hour and a half long. But even at that short runtime, there's nothing to really recommend this movie. It's that bad. At number 3, Borderlands. Probably the biggest financial flop of the year. Borderlands is a giant video game property. Now, I'm not a gamer, but it's one of the more popular, more lucrative gamings ever created. And, this movie had a lot going for it. Kevin Hart, Cate Blanchett, Jack Black, written and directed by Eli Roth. But man, holy crap, was this bad. And I love Kevin Hart. Kevin Hart's funny. Kevin Hart in this movie is supposed to be this badass, tough mercenary / soldier. Kevin is one of the few people who is shorter than me. It's just hard to buy him in this role. And we're supposed to also buy Cate Blanchett as a badass bounty hunter. I love you, but you might be a little too old for that role. Overall, it was a terrible theater experience. It's not worth watching. Avoid it at all costs. It's painful.
That looks really painful.
So painful.
At number 2, Argylle. Man, I was so excited for this movie when I initially saw the trailer. The cast. Look at the cast. Bryce Dallas Howard, Henry Cavill, Sam Rockwell, Dua Lipa, John Cena, Bryan Cranston, Samuel L. Jackson. Directed by Matthew Vaughn. I mean, what could go wrong?
What can go wrong?
Everything. Everything could go wrong. So, Argylle is the story of Bryce Dallas Howard. She's an author. She writes these spy novels. But here, it turns out that the spy novels are true. They're suppressed memories or something. She's actually a spy. They're coming after her. It's hard to buy her as the spy. She looks like kind of a frumpy middle-aged woman. It gets even worse when they show her shooting and ice skating and killing and the special effects. I've seen better special effects on CW shows. 2 hours and 20 minutes of your life that you will never get back. Best to avoid this film at all costs. If you saw it, you have my sympathies.
You have my deepest sympathy.
And at number 1, the absolute worst movie I've seen this year, and possibly one of the worst movies that I've seen over the last half decade, is Joker 2, or Joker Folie à Deux, or however the hell you want to pronounce it. I don't care. It was one of the most miserable theater experiences I have ever been party to. It's a shame because the acting wasn't terrible. The cinematography was decent. but the story itself is flat out awful. If you like the first movie, if you like The Joker, which most people did, it's a brilliant film, and you haven't seen this, I beg you not to. This movie takes everything you liked about that first movie, tears it up, burns it, pisses on it, shits on it. I was actually angry leaving the theater. I can't even, there's not enough adjectives to describe how bad this movie was. And it's long too, man. It's like a 2.5 hour film. It was so far and away the worst thing. It wasn't even close. This wasn't even a close contest. Joker 2 was the worst movie of the year. One of the worst movies that I've seen over the last half decade. Maybe one of the worst movies I've ever paid to see. Well, there you go. My bottom 10. Now, next week, I will probably be reviewing Nosferatu. I plan on seeing that. Hopefully, it's not one of the 10 worst I've seen. Travel looks really good. I don't think it will be. And then after that, I'll give you my top 10 movies of the year.
I cannot wait.
But that's it for me this week. Tune in next week where I give you my thoughts and feelings on Nosferatu. In the meantime, click that like button, subscribe, leave a comment or a question. Share this video with friends and enemies alike. And as always, thank you for giving me your valuable time. And I'll see you next week. Take care.